Well, I guess we'll begin. Good afternoon again. My name is John Edward Dallas. I'm the director of Interboro Community Land Trust, and this is our panel discussion on equitable homeownership and community power. And I'd like each of the panelists, well, before I have you introduce yourself, I just want to thank you very, very much for being here this morning, because I know how extremely busy you are, each and every one of you. So thank you for your generosity with your time. And so I'll start with right from this end and go right ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stephen Erdman. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Homeownership Opportunities and Preservation at HPD. So I oversee our programs that create the financing for new development of affordable homeownership. We provide down payment assistance, and we also provide assistance to existing lower income homeowners in a variety of programs.
Good morning, everyone. Great to see everyone's faces. I feel like I should have powdered my forehead with the amount of lights that are here, so hopefully the shine is not blinding you. My name is Sabrina Lippman. I have the esteemed privilege of being the CEO for Habitat for Humanity, New York City and Westchester County. We have been here in New York for the past 40 years, building, preserving, and advocating for affordable homeownership for working class families, and very excited for this conversation. So thank you for having me today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rosa Custodio from East Harlem, a Bahia Community Land Trust, president, and also resident liaison.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brianna McClure. I'm a program manager at Enterprise Community Partners. We are a national CDFI operating across the 50 states, including the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico.
And thank you for those introductions. And I just want to say that we all pretty much know each other or know of each other, and we've worked together. Some 2 or 3 of us, or each of you, have worked with each other separately. And so we know about the power in partnership. So with this discussion, we're going to talk about the power of community and the equitable homeownership model. So to do some level setting, I just want to ask each of you to from your sector, explain what your understanding is of the equitable homeownership model in practice, and how does it differ from traditional homeownership models? So I'll start with you, Stephen, and then work my way to the other end of the podium.
Great. Thank you, John Edward. So I think it's a really important question for us to kind of think about what are the ideals that should inform the work that we're doing and the programs that we're setting up. And I think from HPD's perspective, something we talk about a lot, as we have many different programs that are trying to tackle the challenges of homeownership in New York City, is providing people with options and with choice. And these are really important tenets of fair housing, that when people have the ability to choose different paths, they don't get boxed into certain futures that may not be best for their circumstances. And I think that is something we think about with our homeownership programs, that we want to give people different options on how to be homeowners. The market provides some fairly narrow options. We have programs that are creating homeownership that looks similar to market rate homeownership, but is reducing barriers to that. That would be like our down payment assistance. But then we have programs that are creating homeownership models that provide more support through our limited equity cooperative development programs. And then we also have our community land trust projects with homeownership opportunities that have this governance structure that the homeowners are part of to help support them with complying with all of the requirements of being part of an affordable housing project, but also giving them access to supports on maintaining their home and remaining stable as a homeowner. And so I think that's part of, when you think about equity in homeownership is creating these different options for people to meet them where they're at in creating access to homeownership.
And that would be one of the primary differences between the equitable homeownership model and the traditional homeownership model? That assistance, that support?
I guess I'm seeing kind of the equity as us creating all of those different types of models so that people can have the option of what version makes sense for them.
Got you. Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, I love that on the option. I think for Habitat, when we think about equitable homeownership, it's about access and permanence, right? So traditional homeownership assumes that everyone can compete in the market, when we know that in New York City that is absolutely not the case. So how do you create access for entry, which is critical, but almost equally as critical of ensuring that these families and the working class can stay in these communities is ensuring that it's not just for that one family, ensuring that there is permanence so that that space remains affordable, and that all of the public investment that the city and the state put in, that the community effort that was put in over generations to create these neighborhoods remain available and accessible to working class families. So I think that's really how equitable homeownership differs.
Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you so much for that. Rosa, what's your take on what equitable homeownership means? And how does it
adding
differ?
to the language context of the CLT, it's different additional ownership. We have 99 years ground lease to protect the building, the core MHA for the resident. So it's a different language of ownership because it's rental.
So for enterprise, quality affordable housing and local ownership really is the backbone of a stable community. So equitable home ownership, that really means letting people have a say in the future of their neighborhoods. So enterprise, we have been very committed to community development that's driven by shared equity, community ownership models across the country. So in practice, as a CDFI, this has meant supporting shared equity models such as community land trust. And we've been able to do this through our CLT initiative, and in particular through our community land trust capacity building program, where we're able to leverage $4.2 million in funding to support the formation as well as the acquisition of land, rehabilitation, revitalization as well, so that home ownership and affordable housing remains a possibility in these communities long term.
Thank you for that. And the next question I wanted to ask, I have one for each of you, so we can start get the conversation going about the power aspect of this. Are there any, in your travels, are there any misconceptions that you find regarding the equitable homeownership model? And I want to start with Rosa on this. Do folks get it? Do we get it? Are there areas where we need to improve our understanding of it or help the public understand these models better?
Yes. Hello? Yeah. At first, at the beginning, community land trust, the language of residents in the community had to understand what it means, CLT. We had to educate them. We had to inform them, secure them, because they were going to third party. So out of the third party, they was gonna go remove seniors, remove people that have been there 20 years, 40 years in the apartment. So they joined us, so we had education. We have different groups like Nicely, New Economy, Picture the Homeless. So we brainstormed, we sat down, we did paperwork, we did workshop trainings to prepare these residents, so that's how they joined us. And they succeed and they're very happy. And everybody really looking for is rehab. These buildings been 100 years old. So repairs is number one. Consistent with the roof, leaking, ceiling, pipes. Everything else that's what really they're looking for. After so many years living in their building, they don't want to be pushed out. They want to stay in the community they know for many years.
Yeah, and on the misconceptions, I mean, from the Habitat perspective, because the Habitat model has evolved, right, throughout the years. It started one family, one home, which is critical. But one of the misconceptions when we talk about limited equity that we hear is that it's not real homeownership,
Yes.
right?
That's
We hear that a lot,
That's right.
but it is, right? And there are, not only is there one, there are three ways it's real homeownership. There is the pocket equity, right, of that family that is now protected and is living in an affordable rental, right? What they're able to pocket month after month. There is the earned equity of when they're paying down their share loan, and then there is the appreciated equity, right, which is stable, right? It is not full market value, it is limited, but it absolutely appreciates. That doesn't take into account the qualitative takeaways of this, the being able to know that you have control of your future and you have ownership alongside your neighbors of what happens next. And so to me, I think it's a misconception that we try to battle often.
Where does the misconception arise? Is it because these are new models? They're not more widely known. What's the origin of the misconception?
This is the part that I'm always baffled by. With rental, right? You have so many different forms of rental. You have supportive, you have senior housing, you have market rate, you have, affordable, but there's only one kind of homeownership. And so when folks look at homeownership, they work in this very myopic field of it needs to be extraction value, right? It only is an investment. That's not the case for working class families who just need a place to live and want to thrive in the communities they were in. So how do we continue to invest and diversify the types of homeownership that exist and allow that perspective to broaden?
Stephen, I see you nodding your head in agreement here. Do these misconceptions that folks have about the Equitable model, do they have an impact on HPD's ability to finance these projects or to push these projects to? I mean, we definitely would like to hear your perspective on this.
Yeah, we definitely get a lot of pushback on all of our limited equity programs, whether it's the community land trust model or our limited equity cooperatives, because there's a concern that it's not real homeownership, that we're not achieving the wealth building outcomes that are so desired to help close the racial wealth gap and address other issues that we're seeing in our communities. So we've done a lot of work at HPD to really analyze that concern and put a kind of a quantitative approach to thinking about the balance between wealth building and long-term affordability that many of us are trying to achieve in our communities using these different models. We engaged last year with 40 different organizations. We had 70 representatives from those organizations come to 10 different stakeholder meetings with us, where we talked about kind of the analysis we had done and gotten feedback. And we are looking forward to reconvening those stakeholders for a part two now that we've taken the last few months to do more work based off of all of the feedback that we had gotten. So I think that's part of how we're trying to address the misconception, is engage with them head on, because I think the concerns that people express are valid. They're worried that we're not achieving what we're trying to achieve with our homeownership programs because of these restrictions that are in place to protect affordability. So that's one of the ways we're thinking about it. If I could just add, though, related to it,
Of course you can.
I also, on the other side, we hear a lot this belief that the only way to achieve permanent affordability with homeownership is through something like the community land trust model, which from HPD's perspective, we don't see that to be the case. We have 1,100 co-ops in New York, HDFC co-ops in New York City that are not on CLTs that we do see as being permanently affordable. But we do see that far too many of these co-ops are really, really struggling. They're struggling to comply with HPD's affordability requirements that are permanent. They're struggling to keep the buildings maintained. Sometimes they're struggling to, if they have water bills, they're struggling to pay their water bills. So that's where we really see the potential for the community land trust model to be combined with our homeownership structures to provide that additional oversight and support that can help reduce those types of problems that we see in this portfolio.
Thank you, Stephen. Brianna, what are you seeing on the national level? I remember I saw something that you wrote in June about ideas that folks have in the community about these. What are you seeing in terms of misconceptions or areas where the understanding can be improved?
Yeah, absolutely. So my work is primarily focused with CLTs in New York State. And I think one common misconception that I see is that CLTs, although they have often, a common mission of some level of community ownership. A lot of people think that CLTs are all the same, but the reality is that CLTs really vary in terms of housing typology. Some CLTs might be, a rental building, some might be single family. There's obviously, ownership. Some CLTs are focused on rentals, other CLTs are focused on, ownership, obviously geography as well. We're talking about New York State, so, you have urban CLTs, CLTs that are operating in rural areas, and then obviously project type. Some CLTs are focused on new construction and others are focused on preservation. So I think, understanding that CLTs are operating on different levels, they have different geographies, and they are also responding to different needs within their communities as well.
Thank you for that. And I want to piggyback on what you said. And can each of you give the audience an example of a shared equity model? Because everyone wants to know about successes, right? That has successfully preserved affordability. And I want to add another element in here, and it shouldn't be surprising, and community power.
This is my favorite question
Oh,
because
right.
I
There
could
we
talk
go.
about our examples all day long. So
Okay.
we've been here 40 years. My favorite example is the very first building, the one that created Habitat here in New York City. And the reason this one is special, it's in the Lower East Side on East 6th Street between Avenue C and D. It's called Mascot Flats. Hopefully you saw it in the news a few weeks ago. And the reason it was in the news is because this was a tenement building that was burnt out in 1984. And President Carter at the time, who had worked with Habitat in the South but had never swung a hammer, came out and was invited by the first Habitat ED to come look at the building. And he went up to the roof and he looked down and there was a woman making her breakfast over an open fire in the alley. And he looks out and you see all of Manhattan, right? And he cannot fathom how this is possible. So he turns to our ED and he says, "What could I do?" And he said, "To be honest with you, we need carpenters." And he came back 2 weeks later with 2 Greyhound buses full of volunteers, and that was the first time that President Carter ever swung a hammer for Habitat in the Lower East Side. So the history here is rich. 19 families, working class families that put in their sweat equity, that rebuilt that building, and today, close to 41 years later, half of those families are still there. It is one of the only HDFCs that have survived the gentrification that has existed in that neighborhood. And if I can point to one story, Don Cow, who is an original homeowner who is battling significant health issues, he talks about how had it not been for the stability of that home, he wouldn't have been able to not only focus on his health, but he ended up following his passions, created a nonprofit that helped at-risk LGBTQ youth, that has served thousands of youth in the Lower East Side, so much so that the New York Public Library is cataloging his book of work. That's the story of Habitat, and that's the story of the importance of limited equity.
And apparently community power, right? Can others on the panel, can you share some examples that you know of where a successful model where you have affordability, right? A shared equity model with affordability and community power? Rose, I'm looking right at you because...
No, sorry, that was hard to follow. I should have waited.
I'm always,
Because East Harlem El Barrio,
I'm always in
we
the
have to
hot
give you
seat.
your props here.
I'm sorry, say it again.
So you, with your MHA, right, you've created permanent affordability. And at the same time, because you're a resident liaison, you've managed, I believe, to maintain community power, or that's the goal.
Yes. So again, communication, connection, calling, consistent every month meeting with them with workshop training, what their ideas, what they want. So I'm a listener. I speak for them. I advocate for them. I show them how important, because a lot of them was in arrears, and arrears really makes them a real big hole for them. So educate them why, and listening to what happened to their story, so how we could build back again, go back to the track. Some of them lost their income, their job, or the job is not the same salary. They lost family member. They had to pay bills. So I told them, pay your current, and pay little by little till you catch up your arrears. I didn't know about this program called ERAP. I learned. I'm learning from the residents. I'm learning some management, learning with each other and feeding back with each other. So that's why something they survive with the ERAP. ERAP, you don't have to pay back. But when you go to HRA and you get one-shot deal, you have to pay back. And unfortunately, in the years later on, but you do have to pay back. But again, try to educate people why it's important to pay your rent, to survive, to keep your rent, and to don't be homeless. And you have some of them so many years living there, so much equity, time in their apartment. Why not keep it for long? A lot of people survive. I know one person, 58 years in their apartment.
Wow, that's a great track record. Stephen wants in, please.
Yeah, I'm so glad you shared all of that, and we're excited to see your project that we've been working on with you continue to move towards completion and have more of those buildings complete construction. So we're excited to see that work continue. I also want to kind of steal Sabrina's thunder and your thunder, John Edward, and talk a little bit about Habitat's Net Zero Homes project, which we don't have people living in yet, but almost will. And I see Yangshen is here, who's working hard to sell the homes that have been financed by this project. Okay, great.
Yes.
So this project was a first for HPD that we worked on with our partners Habitat and Interboro CLT to finance single-family homes, which is a rare typology for us at HPD, that will be on a community land trust with a 99-year ground lease, like Rosa had mentioned her project has. And so I just want to talk a little bit about how this structure has enabled us to achieve some outcomes that we couldn't have achieved without the community land trust structure. So the land for this project was conveyed by NYCHA. This is 13 parcels that had homes that had been foreclosed upon long ago, that FHA had transferred then to NYCHA, and the homes fell into disrepair and were demolished, and so these are vacant parcels. And HPD provided capital financing to Habitat to rebuild new single-family homes, and we also worked with the City Council to provide an Article 11 tax exemption. We were able to provide that tax exemption because the underlying land will be owned by the Interboro CLT, which incorporated as an HDFC, which is a requirement to get this tax exemption. So the tax exemption, because it's Article 11, can be for 40 years, and it can be renewed at the end of that period, right? And so that 40-year exemption is part of how we're then able to require ongoing affordability requirements on the homes. If we had just conveyed the property with NYCHA to Habitat without the CLT model, we could only have used a UDAP tax exemption. Sorry, I'm getting so technical here, but I think it's interesting.
Go right ahead, Stephen.
The UDAP, yeah, you're testing me on what UDAP stands for. But that tax exemption is only maximum of 20 years, and it starts to actually the benefit tapers off towards the end of that 20 years, and it can't be renewed. And so we wouldn't think it'd be fair to have a tax exemption expire and continue to require affordability on the homeowner, right? And so we've done many homes using UDAP tax exemptions, and I think that model is worthwhile as well, because somebody, puts in their time, 20 years, and then they own the home free and clear of restrictions. We've seen some really great outcomes, but we do lose it as an affordable housing resource after that period. So for the net zero homes, we won't lose those homes as an affordable housing resource because of the combination of the exemption, the HDFC structure, the 99-year ground lease, HPD's regulatory agreement are all working together to provide affordability and also to provide support to the homeowners. If they fall on hard times, if they struggle with their mortgage, if they struggle with repairing their homes, hopefully the CLT will be there, right, to
Yes.
to lend some support, which I know you already have been doing for some of your other homes.
Yeah, and just to put one finer point on it, and I think we'll get to this later in the conversation about the importance of public-private nonprofit partnership in this model. And I don't know if Catherine and Luisa are in here from Wells Fargo. There they are. But the beauty of this project, Wells Fargo was an incredible partner also in this project, not only from a financing perspective, but literally lending a hand, picking up a hammer and helping us keep the cost of the home lower by putting in their own sweat equity. And so it really only happens through true partnership.
Thank you for that. And Brianna, maybe you could help, we can tie this together. Looking, on the outside in here, what do you see as the community power element in this is clearly a successful, I'm tooting my own horn here, it's a successful shared equity model, but the community power element, how would Enterprise look at this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think I mentioned this before, but again, really allowing residents to have a say in the future, the future of their neighborhoods, being added to that decision-making process as well is super important. At Enterprise, we're really looking at different models and opportunities that will, preserve affordable housing long-term, that will stabilize communities and also generate wealth-building opportunities for low-income families in particular. But I think it's also important to say that a lot of the time, philanthropic partners, we do need to be risk takers. And I say that to say, oftentimes, grants in particular, they are over a shorter period of time. However, in order to see long-term impact, you have to, create a program. You have to have a grant that has a longer time frame in order to see those longer-term impacts. There was a report released by Grounded Solutions that actually said, on average, it takes a CLT 7 years before they're actually able to do their first, rental building, and 13 years for home ownership. So with that being said, it's really important to, create programs that support CLTs in their capacity building and other shared equity models as well, so that they are set up for success in the long term.
Can I just
course
piggyback,
you
because
can.
I couldn't agree more. I think, Brianna, you hit the nail on the head, is allowing for that flexibility in funding. And part of that comes in trust, right? Trusting the CLT, trusting the communities, trusting the nonprofit. I didn't mean to be shouting out the entire time, but Larissa Longchamp is here from Citibank, and
That's right.
They have an incredible community progress makers initiative that not only trust these nonprofits and CDFIs to do the work, but then provide the tools, right? Because it's almost like you have to manage the manager a little bit.
Thank you for that. Rosa?
So besides trust, connection, email, phone, text, in person. Sometimes we see so much each other in Zoom when we finally come in here. Oh, hi, face to face, matching. So again, since the COVID, it really hit us to lock down, and it was hard to connect. But luckily, we have a communication, Zoom or phone call. So luckily for that, we have that to continue. But it also made a hardship for projects to move along, especially construction. It shut down. And then when it shuts down, it's more money. So then we have to get loans, connection, how we could look for money. And then again, it's going to cost us towards the end to pay the loan. And sometimes the rate is too high. So we have to work how to make it work for both and make it lower rate, because it's hardship with these buildings, and the amount we collect from the resident, it's very low income, and if you want to make it affordable, so we have to make arrangement how we could work in the bank. You mentioned 2 banks or an HPD project. So again, partnership, connection, networking, and touching base, it's powerful.
Rosa, to piggyback on what you said, and this is a question for the entire panel, are there any tensions inherent in the model between permanent affordability, creating the affordability, and empowering the community? Does it really go hand in glove? Is it a perfect fit, or are they challenges?
It's challenges, because they're trying to raise the market rate, and I'm like, do you understand what's affordable? What's the language affordable, deep affordable? So it's a challenge because, again, the building has to survive, right? You have to collect rent, you have to pay the bills. So there's insurance, light bills, the building to survive. That's the reason it's collecting. So it's a big challenge because you have to make sure the resident could afford it, because some of them only could make a rent 300 and the market rate, they want to make 1,000 something. So it's, again, Section 8 or city feds. There's a program maybe only to 5 years, or Section 8 is yearly. You have to apply yearly to show your income, you can afford it. So that's a long journey that we still have to work on that.
And does anyone else want to weigh on this? Is there a tension between, because the whole point of this, resident-led projects, right? The CLT, eventually the residents on the CLT get to elect directors to the board, right? In a co-op, limited equity co-op, the residents govern themselves. But are there challenges in the model itself that really don't favor the community empowerment, the resident empowerment? And Stephen, you already have the mic in your hand, so please go, please.
I think it's a really interesting question to think about, and I do think that there's some significant tensions in when we are applying the community land trust model to empower residents. And I think one example to try to illustrate it is with the limited equity cooperative model. So there's, as I mentioned before, a lot of co-ops that are struggling. There have been some proposals to put some of these co-ops onto community land trusts as a way of stabilizing them, which is something that HPD has signified we're open to doing. But we really are going to need the shareholders of those co-ops to weigh the pros and cons and the trade-offs of such a transition. When you're a limited equity co-op with a regulatory agreement with HPD, the shareholders of the co-op have the power, right? They are managing their property manager, they are hiring their co-op monitor, they're reporting to HPD, they're in charge of their building. When you put a limited equity co-op on a CLT, now the CLT has a lot of power over the co-op because the CLT owns the land beneath the co-op. It has a ground lease with the co-op. The CLT has a regulatory agreement with HPD. HPD is going to be looking to the CLT to enforce certain things if the co-op is not complying. I think this can be a really good outcome, and it can provide more support to the co-op, but it is the reality that the individual shareholders' power has been diminished because now the CLT's board is not made up of just the shareholders of that building. It's made up of shareholders of maybe other buildings, community stakeholders, representatives of the public, which I think is a good thing to have kind of this, push and pull among different stakeholders, right? And it can also provide support. But I think these things are really important for existing co-ops, to think about what might they be giving up, what might they be gaining before they're moving forward with kind of a change in the ownership structure.
Wow, Stephen, that's a really interesting point that you raised. And I see Brianna's nodding. Brianna, are we not doing, is there a better way to make prospective CLT residents or shared equity residents aware of some of these challenges? Because maybe they're not, well, we have all of the power. Stephen, you're smiling, but the implication is that the residents are not, the community is not all powerful in these models. You're smiling, okay. Is that your perspective on this, Brianna?
So at Enterprise, we really work with, we're working with CLTs. We are a mediator, and so, we're not having direct conversations with residents, but rather, CLT, board members, staff, volunteers. But I think it is important to be transparent and, take a step back and look at the market that we're dealing with. Which is there are few opportunities for long-term sustainability right now. And as an example, Enterprise, we actually released a report very recently that showed over 50% of rental buildings in particular are operating in a negative cash flow, and 64% of those are actually nonprofit owners. So when looking at CLTs, the reality is that a lot of CLTs, many of them, some have been operating for a long time, but there are many in particular in New York City that have recently operated. And so CLTs, oftentimes they do not have the upfront costs and resources, needed to navigate affordable housing development. And so with that being said, at Enterprise, we've really been looking at opportunities to support CLTs and looking at their long-term, strategic business planning, as well as, their long-term stewardship practices as well. Again, through the CLT initiative, we've been able to do that through the Change Capital Fund, in which we have done trainings, again, helping CLTs to begin to craft their long-term strategic business plans and really, prepare and look at what's going on in the market and how it may affect them, and, create strategic partnerships as well. I think Sabrina and Rosa mentioned that, private partnerships and the importance of that in the long term, which I'll talk more about as well, but later on, so.
Thank you for that. So how do we increase community power with these models, right? Because they're looked at as synonymous, shared equity homeownership models. It's all community power is there, but how do we empower the community? How does it really happen? From what you're saying, it's education, right? Stephen, you implied that, well, they need to be aware of the trade-offs, that they're not fully in charge. And yeah, let's drill a little deeper into that. How do we enhance the community power?
Yeah, I would say for Habitat, I think it's acknowledgement first, right? Acknowledge that these aren't just first-time home buyers. They are probably first-generation owners, first in their family, first in their social cohort. And so from a training perspective, one of the things that we talk about is running alongside, not ahead. And so that starts with pre-purchase education, right? The more we can share and show and help understand, right, what you're about to embark on before you get in, but not stopping there, right? The post-purchase training is critical, is staying with the families so that they can see success, and then that long-term technical assistance. And so to Brianna's point, this is why the partnership is so important, because we have government who helps set the rules and have the land available. We have the nonprofits who come in and can provide some of that technical assistance that's so desperately needed. And then on the private side, being able to help fund innovation, fund that work is critical.
Thank you for that. Is there a direct connection or any connection at all between resident education, resident participation, and community empowerment? Does it just happen automatically? We're a limited equity co-op. We're in a CLT. We get to elect members to the CLT board. Is that it? Is that just you get elected to the positions? Is there something that residents need to do to be empowered, to secure their own empowerment? Please.
I want to maybe talk about an HPD requirement that has been a little controversial, but I think part of the intention of the requirement is to empower the members of a community land trust board. So we do require, when we work with the community land trust, that 20% of the board has what we would call significant affordable housing experience. So we're talking about like professional experience, developing or managing affordable housing projects. And the reason for that is we want the board to have this expertise within it, because we think that expertise empowers the entire organization then to engage with HPD better, right? To be able to push us in productive ways, to partner with a developer, right, more effectively, and to be able to advocate for what is really important to the CLT when there's that expertise.
Tongue-in-cheek, Stephen, so you didn't just come up with this requirement to add another administrative hurdle to the CLTs, that's the goal here?
Yeah, that is really part of the goal, is that we want the CLTs to be, that we're working with, to be, effective stewards of affordable housing. And so we think that having, we could just say, it's fine, the board can be whatever the board is, and you hire experts, right? But we want the decision makers to have that knowledge, like, be core to what they are as an organization. We said 20% because we know we see a lot of value in the tripartite, the traditional tripartite board structure that CLTs often use. And so we didn't want to like overwhelm. We didn't say a third, right? Or we wanted to leave flexibility, and that 20% can be satisfied. Maybe there's a resident who's an affordable housing professional, and that's fine. Maybe there's a community stakeholder. Interboro has in its board structure, the 4 founding nonprofits, and that is how Interboro satisfies that requirement. There's a lot of different ways our CLT partners satisfy it, and that we tried to have a pretty flexible requirement so that there's still choice in how to execute it.
Thank you for that clarification, Stephen. Brianna, I see you. You have the mic in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. So oftentimes CLTs are, created in direct response to, concerns about speculation, displacement, gentrification, et cetera. But CLTs, when they form, when they become incorporated, et cetera, they are an organization. But the reality is that CLTs, they consist, like you said, John Edward, of community members, their staff, there are volunteers, there are board members, and these all make up the actual CLT. So with that being said, one of the things in speaking to many CLTs that we learned is that while organizing is the backbone of many CLTs, we learned that, a lot of, staff or board members and volunteers, they did not have that, direct expertise in the affordable housing industry, which is highly technical, which even today is what we're seeing. So in response to that enterprise, we launched the New York State Community Land Trust Training Series. And the purpose of that was to provide CLTs, with information so that they can have meaningful participation as they engage in these, very expensive and technical deals. We worked with 13 CLTs across the state, and we covered topics such as understanding joint ventures, a deep dive into affordable housing, pre-development and property acquisition, as well as affordable housing finance. And again, the purpose of that was to provide, again, people, staff members, board members, volunteers with a foundational understanding, as well as exposure to other partners. So we also invited, we had government partners that came, climate resiliency experts, some lawyers, and the purpose of that was really to leverage the different, knowledge of various sectors so that we can provide CLTs with the holistic support and information that's needed. And the idea behind that is that when you equip board members, staff, volunteers, community members with this information, then they are able to then feel empowered to then have a say in their community. So I think that's one way how, at Enterprise, our work with CLTs have, hopefully translated down into communities and residents. Yeah.
Thank you for that. I want to push this a little further out. So how can this shared equity homeownership model be part of a broader movement for racial and economic justice? I think that's a question that many folks in the audience, I know some of them, I think they like to hear a response to that. Yeah, how? And again, that's tied into community power, but how can these shared equity models tie in to the quest for racial and economic justice in New York City?
I mean, I'll start. I think affordability is justice, right? So I think the biggest barrier of ownership for people of color in this city is how much it costs, right? Like that is the biggest barrier. So this allows for the ability for working class families to enter into this space. I mean, I think that's first. But I also think it has the opportunity to undo the incredible damage that redlining has had in this city, right? Because it's handing land back to the community that was stripped away, communities that were completely priced out or pushed out. And so I think it's hand in glove.
Got you. Anyone else want in on this one? And I see you. Yeah, go right ahead, Stephen.
I think the money piece is really important, but the cost of some of these models is so significant, it does require us to think about if we're using those resources in the best way to bring about racial and economic justice. So just to kind of put things in perspective, we just released a new term sheet for the Open Door program, which is our new construction homeownership limited equity, mostly creates limited equity co-ops, new ground up co-ops. Each unit costs HB about $500,000 to create.
Each unit.
Each unit. So it's very expensive, right? And part of it is because we can't use low-income housing tax credits for these types of homeownership projects. So the city needs to pay for most of the project's costs. The deeper the sales prices, the lower the sales prices are for the units, the greater the HPD subsidy needs to be. And that's why we're seeing costs around $500,000. A lot of people say to us, why are you doing any of that? Why don't you just do more down payment assistance? Why don't you just give people money to buy homes in New York City? And we're doing that too. We expanded our Home First down payment assistance program, but we don't think that's enough, right? We don't want to just give down payment assistance to people because in many communities in New York City, there aren't homes to buy. There's either not affordable homes for people who currently are renting in a community to purchase, or there's just very few homes to purchase at all. And so that's part of the value we see in investing so much money into actually creating these new opportunities and not just giving assistance to lower the barrier to those existing opportunities.
Yeah, if I can piggyback off that, I mean, the price tag is astounding, right? But I would also argue this is long-term, right? This is long-term. This is an investment in the future of not only these families, but all the families that come along with it after that, right? And having home ownership is critical to a healthy housing continuum. You look at the families that we serve at Habitat. 80% of the families we serve are single moms of color with 2 or 3 jobs. So these are paraprofessionals in the day, health home aides at night, maybe they take a shift at the restaurant just to provide for their families. Most of them are living in public housing, not because they want to live there, but because we have less than a 1% vacancy rate in this city. Where are they going to go? And we can only push these families so far out. That is not good for New York City. That is not good for economic development. And so they stay. When Habitat comes and they're able to purchase their first home, right, and change the lives of their families for generations to come, almost as important as that is the fact that now you freed up that public housing unit for someone in supportive to move into, for someone in the shelter to move into supportive, for someone on the street to move into that shelter. We do not have enough options for families in this city, and homeownership is critical. So as significant as this investment is, and kudos to the city for recognizing it, the lack of diversity of housing typology is what has caused the situation, which is why we need more.
Right. Wow.
I wanted to add that partnership, like I mentioned earlier, nicely, new economy, picture the homeless, different CLT we meet, and there's a lot vacant lots for over 70 years. That's a lot of boarded up building. We does the studies, we have the information, and we need the city to really listen to our study because we need to move people in their healthy home apartment they could pay. Stop with the shelter. Shelter is $5,000 a month or more, but you cannot help a family to pay $1,000 or $2,000 a month. Shelter is an emergency. Shelter is when somebody got caught fire in their apartment, living there temporary. There's people living in shelter over 10, 15 years.
Wow.
It's a shame they're spending so much money on that. Why you cannot pay rent and help to establish the affordable home.
Wow. 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 That's sort of a hard act to follow there. what city, I'm not singling anyone on the panel out here, but what New York City policy is hindering the growth possible? I'm not putting you on the hot seat here, Stephen, but I think it's something that folks may want to. Are there city policies that are hindering, permanently affordable housing development? And at the same time, are there any policies that are hindering community empowerment? And you have got Sabrina.
I'll start. At Habitat, we are so grateful for our partnership with the City of New York and HPD.
And we really are.
I said that with a little tongue in cheek, but we
Yes.
could not do this work without HPD. So I want to start with that because it literally would not be possible. But one thing that is absolutely hindering that we need more of is blanket financing. So we need to have that one loan over that building versus those individual loans, right? So that the buy-in is lower and then the subsidy goes further, right? And that is something that is critical in order to scale this work. At Habitat, we have our own CDFI. It is small, but the purpose it serves is massive, right? We are at the margins, and what we need is to get more people to the center. We need to get more patient capital. We need to get more pre-development financing. We need institutional lenders to acknowledge that these models can be successful. We can prove them. We can show them. We've been around 40 years. We can show how they can be successful, but they still live at the margins. And so if we can find ways to center that investment, to be able to show, Fannie and Freddie have a duty to serve initiative, which is great. It opens up the secondary market to CLTs, to limited equity, and that's a step in the right direction. We need to fast charge that. We need that flywheel to really get going, and that scale is what gets us to where we need to be.
Wow. Anyone else want to weigh? Are there any from your? Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
Well, I just wanted to say that I actually totally agree, and well, not actually, of course, I totally agree. And the mortgages that people can get to buy our homes is a barrier, I think, to how far our investment can go. And we've been doing a lot of work, and my colleague Anna out there has been leading a lot of this work, and many of you know her from the CLT workshops that HPD has been hosting, and Anna's been facilitating those. We've been taking a really hard look at our regulatory agreement and speaking with Fannie and Freddie about, are there policies in these documents that would prevent you from purchasing mortgages on the secondary market, and trying to remove that as a barrier so that there are more mortgage options available to people. We don't want to just be in a situation where the only products people can get are portfolio loans or a Sonome product. We want people to have more options, and so it's something we're doing a lot of ongoing work on.
Brianna?
Yeah, so as a program manager at Enterprise and managing our community land trust initiative, I'm regularly having conversations with CLTs across the state to try to understand what the needs are, what the gaps are, and how we can, be a partner in supporting them to carry out their mission. And so with that being said, one thing that we've seen and that we've heard from a lot of CLTs is that there is a real need for funding in the pre-development space, and in particular, operational funds. I mentioned those statistics earlier about the amount of time that it takes on average for a home ownership project or a rental project. And so with that being said, it's a lot of work. I'm sure you could speak to that, as a staff member, John Edward. But there's a real need for funding so that CLTs have the financing needed to be able to, do the community outreach, to be able to, take care of their accounting as an example, or hire, legal expertise, or even have the funding to be able to hire a full-time staff member, which is a huge game changer from what we've been hearing. So I think there's a strong need for, more flexible funding. And that's something that, Enterprise has learned over time in working with CLTs.
Thank you, Brianna.
Get it? Yeah, for sure. It's really, you don't realize it until you're in the seat and realize that what's going on there. It's not easy. It's been 13 years. Again, financial is number one. Grant is another one. Workshop, trainings, it's consistent. It's really hard because these buildings are very old and we don't know when we go. We could say 13 million, but they wind up more than that because each building has different needs of repairs. And we prefer total because like that, it's easier, healthy, again, living there because people have asthma, heart problem. People have a lot of different health issue. So again, you want to live in something that's been there for years and old that haven't got rehab. So yes, loan, money, financial, yeah, we have a lot of needs in the CLT. And any building really too also needs a lot.
Well, thank you for that. I think that, well, we'll know during Q&A if we've actually sort of sketched out the connection between affordability and community empowerment. But there's something else I want to just throw out here. I was at a meeting last year, and someone brought up the connection between the actual documents that are part of these deals and community empowerment. And they mentioned that sometimes they're very, very hard to understand. We know that lawyers work on these. And it seems that the lawyers are only, no disrespect to lawyers, but they're creating these documents for themselves, right? You have to get a lawyer to read them. What would happen in terms of community empowerment if we created more user-friendly legal documents, shared equity, homeownership documents? Would you speak to that? Because I was really impressed because the person said that, wow, that the way that we're spoken to through these documents needs to change. It's not really directed to us, and because we don't understand them, we really don't feel empowered. We feel diminished.
Yeah, no, it's such a valid point. And I think there's always two sides of a coin, right? It's really critical that these documents are legally bound.
Yes.
I think what's exciting here, and as we can go down this road, and this would be another topic, but this to me is where technology and AI has a role. Right? It's how are you using AI and technology for community empowerment? And how do you then create an opportunity where you can almost translate these documents? Now, you have to have the technology and the AI that you can trust and understand what tools you're using. But this is where I think there's an opportunity to really think about how we're using technology for the community.
So Sabrina, am I hearing you say, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, that the documents, I got you, they have to, there's a legal requirement that they have to meet. Things have to be covered. We know this, Steve, right? Because it takes a long time to finalize the documents for the shared equity homeownership projects, as with any other. But Sabrina, you're sort of agreeing that, yes, there needs to be a way to make them more understandable.
I do, because listen, I feel very blessed. I'm a first generation. I come from a low-income family in Jackson Heights. My parents and grandparents worked in candy cane factories and hanger factories, and they scrounged up all the money to buy that first home in Jackson Heights. Do they know what they signed? No, wow. Right? I don't know that they know that, but we got lucky, and we were able to keep it. I know stories of folks that were not able to keep it because they didn't understand what was being signed. And so if you have something like an AI that is trusted and vetted, wow, that you can download this document and say, explain to me in layman's terms what's in here and what I'm signing, right? Make sure that you have the right prompts. Tell me what could bite me in the butt 15 years from now, right? And allow the families that are walking into this to feel like they do understand what they're walking into.
Thank you for that. Rosa, I see you have the mic.
Yeah. So, vice versa, we have, thank God, Tech Roots is assisting us. We do the documentation. She review it, and she will do minor changes. I don't think, like in our program, CLT, goes by what we propose and then my minor change. I don't think that they do the work for us and it goes their way. It's to protect the building, to protect the land, to protect the residents. It's basic, and to protect us because, we don't want to get sued, and we want to make sure everybody is aware that what they're signing. And we do read it to some residents, you said. Some people don't know how to read or language because some of them speak Spanish, Italian, Russian, French. So again, it's because, and not only that too, some of them are culture. They don't speak out because that's how they were raised, their culture. And so we have to educate them, and we have to one-on-one, like feel to listen and to be involved of listening why they're not getting involved, why they're not speaking up. Because a lot of them, they know the community very well. A lot of them worked, doormen, teachers, nurse, doctors, lawyers. There's different skills in these different buildings that are living in there, so we have to hear their stories, and they have a lot of good stories.
Go right ahead, Brianna, and I want to go back to something that Rosa just said. Go right ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, again, I mentioned earlier bringing on different sectors. I mentioned the New York State Community Land Trust Training Series, where we did bring on, lawyers to talk about the legal aspects of the affordable housing, development process. However, related to joint ventures, it's really important to find partners that are mission aligned. And so with that being said, I do think, that's another way of which you could have, strategic, private, public sector partnerships, and ensuring that, the people you're working with, there's a good alignment. And so as affordable housing professionals in this field, again, connecting CLTs to, other partners so that they can engage in those strategic and mission-aligned partnerships in the future.
Thank you for that. What I'd like to do is, this is the community out here, so I'd like them to be part of this conversation. So I'd like to open it up to questions and comments from the community. And I think we have someone that's going to walk around with a mic.
Not all at once.
Hi, thank you all so much. My name is Katie. I work for UHAB, and I work with a lot of distressed HDFCs. And actually, this just came on my radar. CLTs were not on my radar till last week. I spoke to someone from, I think it's the Northwest Bronx Coalition. And it was particularly regarding a building where the building is in such distress and the governance is in such poor shape that they're thinking about if there's capacity, trying to join a CLT. And the process of me connecting this building to the CLT and having this conversation, it's been such a game of chance, because it was just, I had an offhand conversation with Ariel, the policy director at UHAB, and then she was like, yeah, I know a guy. And then, I connected the guy with the other guy, and, it's not formalized at all, and it was pretty on me to make sure that's happening in a way that's correct, which of course I do not know if it's happening correctly, because that's not my area of expertise. So I'm just curious in terms of, I know Sabrina, you mentioned the sort of the pre-purchasing training and courses, but is there a pre-onboarding, whether it exists or a realized way of connecting potentially, distressed HDFCs or other organizations or cooperatives to these opportunities and helping them understand off the bat?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. Love UHAB. Love all the UHABers out there. Really, really just love what you guys are doing. You hit the nail on the head. It's interesting because I think when Stephen talks about the HDFCs that are in distress, right? It's a lot because they didn't have that pre-purchase training, that we are where we are today. So the hope is that what is happening now is we're getting in early enough. And I think HPD is, and I want to let Stephen in here, are creating those pathways that are more formalized. But a lot of it is word of mouth. And I do think this is where I feel very blessed to be part of an organization that has the brand that Habitat does. Because this is the work that we are doing, right? Is we are connecting, and having been a founding member of the Interboro CLT alongside UHAB and alongside Manny and alongside the Center for New York City Neighborhoods, it is about this coalition building and knowing what each of us is working on and knowing how we tag one another in and out. The hard part is you're so deep in the weeds, right? It's hard to sometimes come up for air and create that structure that's needed. But I do think that process we're sailing the ship while we're building it, but we are building it.
We're getting better at it.
Can I answer? just to let you know, I'm a HDFC shareholder for 28 years, and we only have 6 members, and the 6th member did sweat equity. So a lot of us know about the roofing, boilers, so we save money. So again, there is some HDFC that does the right thing. There's other HDFC, they just want the, value investment personal to themselves. They're not knowing what's really the program. So again, don't let it fall the ones that really does really good HDFC shareholders.
Wow, Rosa.
I just wanted to add, I think the goal of getting towards a more like formal process, we are still in a place right now where we have a lot of irons in the furnace, where we're trying to get projects with CLTs off the ground into completion. And when we do that, then we'll have more kind of success stories we can point to that may make it easier for us to formalize kind of how to make these connections. But I was just waving to our rep from the Edgemere CLT out here, and we have East Harlem El Barrio CLT, we have Interboro CLT. I know I don't know if we have anyone from Bronx CLT, but Northwest Bronx that you mentioned. And there's the East New York CLT, who I think is on another panel today. And we have HPD has projects with all of these CLTs that I just mentioned that we're working on right now, which is really exciting. And we are at different stages for these projects, but they're going to be finishing over the next few years, and we're going to have these kind of real concrete examples. Right now, we just have the Cooper Square CLT, right, as an example. But we're going to have many more examples soon, and I think that will help us have clearer visions to point to.
Yep, thank you for that. We have a question back here.
Yes, thank you for all the panels that are here. My name is Donna from Grow Brooklyn. Thank you, Sabrina, for talking about AI and the integration of AI and really leveling it down so people really understand the terminology that's being used. But for Sabrina, Rosa, and Brianna, what is one of the things that really touches me with regards to the CLT is the conflict within the internal side on how for them to agree to be a part of the CLT, and how do you get through that for even that whole process? And another part of my question is, how do you and where do you establish a connection with some of the training so that you have the people that are really dedicated to the process that are leveled up when it comes to the training process of managing and maintaining a CLT? Because just because you have a CLT doesn't mean that you can do that and do that correctly, and that's where conflict comes through.
I can start. Thank you for that. And you can keep giving me compliments. Anyone that raises their hand, I like how you started that. No, I love that question, because I think one of the things that it's hard, right? Because there are conflicting, there are conflicts, right? Not everyone, to John Edwards' point and Stephen's point earlier, I think so much of it is education, is understanding, right? I mean, even you take something like affordable housing, right? The stigma that now is associated with that term, right? Across the board. Right. And so for me, I think it's about meeting people where they are first, and then explaining as plainly as you can the benefits and the downsides, because we will have people that say, well, hold on a second. We've been taken out of the equation. We have not had the opportunity to build generational wealth. And now here is this tool that is limiting that, right? And my argument back is that, again, going back to the different types of rental, there needs to be different types of home ownership. And this is one of those models that is needed right now. And whether you're interested in buying in or not really is determines on, it's a catered and tailored thing. What are your current circumstances and what other alternatives exist? And being aware of that universe helps really dig down to, is this right for you in this moment? Just because you end up buying into an HDFC cooperative doesn't mean that's where you might want to stay forever. It might be your first step to the next one. But for many people, it isn't, right? For Don Cow, it's where he's lived for the past 50 years.
Right.
And so it's understanding that as diverse as this city is, really that's how diverse our housing typology should be.
Workshop, trainings, different location. Organizing. We went to the homeless office. We went even to Community Board 11 office. We even went to my home. And then fortunately, a year ago now, made a year, we have an office, permanent office. So again, it depends on the organization, how the divergent, sometimes it's the same people. And sometimes we get burned out, but you have to keep on. And if you want that mission to complete, you have to keep on. And if you have to be fighting by yourself, do it. Don't let nobody stop you. Do your mission and your focus, because that's how you win, and that's how you show everybody else that to move along. And it's been a long challenge. We didn't expect it long, but we're succeeding now.
May I ask, can I just jump in here just for one minute? Because Rosa, I wanted to get back to you on a point that you made before. You implied that there may be cultural barriers to community engagement and thus to community empowerment. Did I hear you correctly? Is that what you sort of said?
Yes,
a while
we
back
have
ago?
different cultural diversity in our program. Right?
Can there be barriers to community engagement and community empowerment?
Yeah, some of them don't want to get involved, or somebody, I stay home. But then when they see, it's like, come. So they see, or sometimes they say, I don't like big crowds. I might want one-to-one.
That sounds like me. Yeah.
So we start one-to-one. Then I say, can I bring one more person similar to your problem? Yes, and that's how you start. And then you start growing. So you do have to go slowly and know about them, because then they're going to close down and they're not going to get involved. So that's when you get people involved. Start one-on-one, and then you build slowly.
Brianna and then Stephen.
Yeah. So to answer your question, I think that's a really good question. And again, I've been talking a lot about strategic business planning, long-term operations. And the word that comes to mind is succession planning. Succession planning I think succession planning, it comes in many different, forms. I'm also a product of a limited equity co-op as well. I grew up in a Mitchell llama that's been passed on for generations. So I think in the context of a CLT, you have your executive director or you have your board members. So really in your bylaws or otherwise, having a plan to ensure that, if this ED does step down, who's going to take the reins. In addition to that, making sure that as, board members or staff, as they get training, making sure that this information is not concentrated with one person. I think, we have a lot of really passionate people, which is super important, and those passionate people keep the mission going. But ensuring that if that passionate person steps down, making sure that everyone else has access to the same information, one, in terms of delegation, but two, again, to make sure that things don't, I guess that robust championing happens over a longer period of time. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, Stephen.
I just wanted to make another note about the trainings that I think we've all touched on being so important. And the partnerships that help us provide good training. So we had worked at HPD. We kind of recognized, HPD can be very difficult to interact with if you're not experienced working with HPD, right? And a lot of the CLTs are new and hadn't had experience working with HPD before. So we wanted to create an opportunity to kind of familiarize the board members of a CLT, the new staff of a CLT, kind of what are some of the aspects of like working on a project with HPD? What would that look like? We worked with the Nicely Coalition, with New Economy Project, with Enterprise, with Take Root Justice, on thinking about what kind of training HPD could offer. And that led into this workshop series that we facilitated now for over a dozen groups, most of which are many of the CLTs that we've talked about and other groups. But I remember, Rose, I don't know if it was you who brought it up, but it might have been, was this comment about some of the other workshops and trainings that HPD has offered, we would like offer some session for like 100 people, and like it made it very difficult for some people to engage with us. And so for this workshop series, we decided we would do it as these like one-on-one sessions, like one organization and HPD, and that's why we did 12 different sessions of it, and each session the total length was 6 hours. So we wanted to give enough time to really engage with people, and not just for HPD to say everything we had to say, but to hear from the CLTs too. And that was the goal. It's not done. We're still, like, we see this as an ongoing effort, and we want to continue to improve our materials and continue learning from all of the organizers who are part of these CLTs.
Thank you for that. I believe we're at. Can we keep going? Oh, one more question? Okay, thank you.
Hi.
I think we stay.
No.
So good.
Thank you all. Thank you for this information. My question is related to, Brianna, what you were describing in terms of succession planning. Months ago, you all may remember this, there was I think it was a CLT near Carnegie Hall, and their lease was up. And there was a huge fight. Like, people who had been there for generations, like you said, were being forced into, it was untenable. They couldn't afford to buy the apartments, but they were stuck in the CLT. And so I'm curious, I don't know how it got resolved, but people who had been there for generations were on the verge of losing their apartments. How do you pull apart ownership or residency within an apartment within a CLT when the CLT is no longer sustainable, either because the owners want an incredible amount of money that nobody can afford to pay, or for some other
Stephen, that's a
reason?
ground lease.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up that example. I am familiar with it. And,
You're welcome.
So I think it's a really good point. So I just want to make one clarification. That was a co-op that's on a ground lease with a private landowner. It's not a community land trust. And there are these scattered throughout the city, some of these co-ops that are in these ground lease situations, which can be very difficult towards the end of the ground lease. You can't get financing, resale values plummet. And so the key difference with the ground leases that we use in the community land trust model is that the term is 99 years, and it resets every time there's like a new execution of the ground lease. So if you have a 1 to 3 family homeowner, when they sell, the CLT will sign a new ground lease with the next homeowner, so it's another 99 years. In the case of a co-op, when you get to the end of the 99 years, so long as the co-op is in compliance and the CLT is in compliance, it automatically renews. So we don't get in that position that you've described. But for those co-ops that are, I don't have solutions myself for the co-ops that may be in that position where they're on a ground lease with a private landowner that's expiring. It's a very difficult circumstance.
Stephen, it's interesting that you brought up that model, because it's a good way to show how we've taken a standard model. The ground lease model is not new. Trinity Church is using it. In fact, I actually teased someone that was from Trinity Church that was at a meeting yesterday. Trinity Church still owns some of the parcels that the King of England gave it during colonial times. So they use the ground lease model, right? And they use it for good purposes. But we also have, in our case, we're a not-for-profit that owns the land under all the properties, the co-ops and the homes on our CLT. So that would never happen with this model. We're not there to make a profit. We're not there to cancel the lease, right? If they can't pay an exorbitant ground lease fee, we're taking the model and we're using it to create permanent affordability and permanent empowerment of the residents on this. But thank you for bringing that up, because every time I read that in the paper, I say, wow, thank God we're using that same model, but we're using it, again, for permanently affordable housing and for community empowerment. So thank you for that. Brianna.
And yeah, I'll just quickly say, I think Stephen answered that very well. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier. It really depends on the way in which the CLT is structured, even the bylaws as well. So I'm glad you were able to, to clarify that point in particular, but it really varies. And that's also where, the legal, education also comes in. But it's also complex, and I think, again, this is a newer, well, I don't want to say a new model, because CLTs have been around for decades, but in terms of in the city.
Because is the land, like, how do you separate the land from the building? Like, who has priority and legally to keep, like, how does that get resolved? I appreciate that.
You're asking the good questions. Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And so the rights and responsibilities of the landowner, the CLT, or the lessor, and then the lessee being, the homeowner, the co-op, the MHA, whatever, right? That owns the improvements. It's all defined really in the ground lease. There is a deed for the improvements that we would just refer to it, the project holds, right? They hold this deed for the improvements, but the rights that you would get conveyed by a deed more traditionally are bound by the restrictions in the lease for the land, in the ground lease. So the key is to read the ground lease and understand kind of what, how is your ownership, as if you're a co-op, a homeowner on a CLT, how is your ownership of that building restricted by the CLT's leasing of the land to you? But it's in the ground lease. That's the key.
And thank you. And I've been told that we're at time. And so I just want to thank all of you for spending time with us this morning, this afternoon. And I want to thank my panelists. And I just want to say that this is a great example of power and partnership. We all know each other. We're working, some of us are on the same deal, some of us are not, but we all know each other, know of each other, and we're a powerful partnership. And thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to continuing the conversation.